97.3 ESPN.com Phillies Insider Frank Klose joins us for the Phillies mailbag as the Phillies get ready to take on the Texas Rangers. That'll be Eichhoff and Darvish tonight, and we'll dive into some Phillies mailbag questions here with Frank. But before we do, Frank, I'd like to get your take on the Cameron Rupp, Bob McClure back and forth, and what happened there.
Yeah, that's a little interesting that a pitching coach will call out a catcher. I think that's a little concerning. I mean, even if Bob McClure thinks that, it's probably not something you want to air out publicly. I mean, let's face it, though. Bryce Harper's hitting everything. He took Jeremy Hellickson deep on a pitch that was kind of low and outside. So it's almost like you can't even fault the pitchers sometimes when Harper connects. But that was just I'm just really surprised that he would do such a thing publicly. I mean, generally I've been a fan of Bob McClure and the job he's done, especially compared to what some other people have thought. But this is probably not a good thing to take public.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going public in that clubhouse, right? I mean, you had the Benoit the week before, not happy with the way they're handling the bullpen, and then Bob McClure. So you wonder if everything's honky-dory over there.
Yeah, you know what? In a lot of ways too. You get a conversation with some of these guys, and you pick up on one little soundbite. It becomes the lead in your article. The next thing you know, it's a big deal. So in some ways, guys will just be venting a little bit, and the problem is it just kind of gets picked up and blows out of proportion sometimes. But I think the Benoit thing is pretty much over and settled. But this McClure thing is a very interesting one, especially when it's pretty clear that Cameron Rupp is not the Phillies' long-term catcher. Even if you aren't a fan of the job he's doing, you might just kind of want to ride this out a little bit.
All right, let's dive into some of the mailbag stuff here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. And let's start with Aaron Nola. And he pitched well the other night, and some people think that he could be coming back. So is there any long-term concern regarding him? He was hurt last year. He hurt again this year.
Well, I think the thing to keep in perspective here is that Nola's had two separate injuries. I think we went into the offseason wondering about Nola's elbow. How is Nola's elbow going to bounce back after the offseason, after getting some rest? It looks like his elbow is fine. Now, this injury was just a little bit in his back. So I think that there's really no major long-term considerations for Nola's health. I think this is just two separate incidents that seem to have come back-to-back, when you consider how close they are in time. And even when the Phillies sent Nola on the disabled list, they didn't think he would be gone long. He made 2 rehab starts now, including last night when he went 6 1/3 innings and gave up no earned runs, struck out 7. He looked really, really, really good in that second rehab start. And I think he's going to rejoin the Phillies rotation next time through, if I had to bet, although they haven't announced anything. But I think there's one other little small tidbit that sort of came out this week from Nick Cafardo of the Boston Globe, who seems to have his pulse on everything. But apparently the Phillies have been letting teams know that Jeremy Hellickson is available. And I don't think that they would let teams know that now unless they felt comfortable with Nola's health, and they felt comfortable, too, that someone like Nick Pivetta could stay and pitch for the Phillies. So that all leads me to believe that his health is just fine, and I think they're just trying to be cautious given the circumstances, where the team is, how they have a ways to go in their rebuild. But, this might be a situation where if Nola was not in such a situation, if they were in a playoff race or something, he might have stuck around for all we know. So I would not be too worried about his health. And I think right now is the time when they can be cautious with every little thing, and I think that's what they're doing.
Frank Klose is with us. The mailbag's open. Frank, another question comes from Max, and it's about one of the concerns for the Phillies. Max wants to know any long-term concern with Franco, Maikel Franco, RE, his ability to adjust.
Right, and Maikel Franco, he seems to has hit a low point in his early major league career. I mean, if you look at the numbers now, he's just batting .209. He's got 5 home runs, which projects to kind of about where he's been in the past, but he's not really been that number 3 or number 4 hitter where the Phillies have tried to use him in that situation. And I think there's a couple things we need to think about when it comes to Maikel Franco. And One is, and Ryan Lawrence of Philly Voice picked this up talking to Matt Stairs, the Phillies hitting coach. He said that there's a little flaw perhaps in Franco's swing, and he thinks that he can find a solution to that little flaw. The thought was that his hands were a little too high at this point, and Matt Stairs is all about the small, compact swing. So hopefully Matt Stairs can work with him. He has been working with Franco to try to get back on track. But one other thing that Matt Stairs said, which is kind of alarming a little bit, he said that Franco in a way is sort of fighting himself. So you got to wonder too. And I thought last year, and I know I said this on the station before, that I thought Franco was putting too much pressure on himself last season to provide all the offense for the Phillies. And let's face it, with the lineups that they were putting forth for a while, where they'd have Borges, Manny Burris, pitcher, kind of all in the row at the end with some combination of David Lowe or Cedric Hunter. They really, really, really needed his offense last year, and in some ways the pressure might have gotten to him. This year they tried to get some protection for him in the lineup in the form of Michael Saunders and Tommy Joseph, neither of whom have been that great perhaps. Now luckily Joseph seems to be coming around a little bit, but maybe it's just a matter of Franco is putting too much pressure on himself to really get going. And in a lot of ways too, one thing that I picked up, that Lawrence seemed to pick up, was that when Franco makes contact, he only hits for a 208 average. So his batting average on balls in play is just 208, and in most cases it's around 300 for every major league hitter. So it could just be a matter of bad luck in some cases. But one thing I said before about Franco too is that he's not striking out too much, which is a good thing. So he's making the contact. Right now the contact seems to be finding its way into outs, but they're going to keep working with him. But I also want to raise the possibility, and I think I said this before too, that maybe the expectations on Franco were just way too high. With no other real offensive force, have Phillies fans perhaps expected Franco to be a number 3 hitter, top offensive force that might not really be who he is? Or do we say he's going to hit 30 home runs because we hope he's going to hit 30 home runs, or is he really a guy that's going to hit 285 and hit 25 home runs? So I think in a lot of ways, the Phillies are trying to figure out exactly who Maikel Franco is. Certainly these little things like quirks with his swing, or perhaps the pressure he's putting on himself, are little things kind of getting in the way of that. But I think those are things that they can work through, and then we'll really get a chance to see. And let's face it too, this is far from the finished lineup for this Phillies rebuild. So maybe he is the 6-hole hitter on the Phillies, as he batted the other day. And maybe he'll do a great job as a 6-hole hitter. So we kind of put in perspective that Franco might not be the number 3-hole hitter who's going to make the All-Star game every year and always hit 30 home runs. Then maybe he can be slotted where perhaps he belongs a little bit better.
Frank Klose with us, and Frank, Roger wants to know what you make of the National Series so far this year, and I'll throw in my Happy Mother's Day belated to your mother-in-law.
Well, thank you. Well, the reason Pete asked that, if you didn't get a chance to read it yet on 973ESPN.com, is that my mother-in-law said to me on Sunday, "Why do the Phillies always play the Nationals?" Well, if you look at their matchup, out of the Phillies' first 35 games, they have played the Nationals 12 times. In fact, of any 2 teams who played each other in the Major League Baseball this year, they lead the pack with 12. So it's been a rather large chunk of the Phillies early going in the 2017 season. So in a lot of ways, I think that the matchup between the two, if you consider that Pat Neshek, he had given up no runs all year, Michael Taylor gets way out in front of this one ball on Sunday. It just happens to hit the foul pole for a 2-run home run, and they win that game. The Nationals do. They were that close to splitting these 12 games with the Nationals, which I think is pretty fascinating, especially when you consider that the middle of this Nationals order right now is just deadly, because you have 3, 4, 5, 6. You see Bryce Harper, Daniel Murphy. Then behind him is a Ryan Zimmerman who is hitting better than he ever has in his major league career. And then even behind him, you have Anthony Rendon, who's a really, really nice player. So the offense generated by the Nationals is going to feast pretty much on anybody's pitching staff. Certainly, the Phillies have taken their lumps from them as well. And I don't worry too much about some of that offense that has caused the Phillies to lose some of those games. If you look at the greater picture, did those runs come off of people who are part of the Phillies' future? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's pretty, like I said, it was almost a split 6-6 series. And when you look at what the Phillies relievers did, the ones that aren't going to be around perhaps compared to them, I really think that it was kind of encouraging when you kind of look at all these things together. Yeah, Nick Pivetta, he had a good 4 innings before that middle of the order kind of got to him. But you kind of look for those positive things going forward from the young Phillies. Certainly their offensive resiliency coming back at the Nationals bullpen time and time again. I think that's all pretty positive stuff moving forward. And the Phillies' schedule is going to get a lot easier not having to face those same 3, 4, 5, 6 hitters every single time they play, it seems. And they're going to get to face the Rangers. Now, Darvish is on the mound tonight, so it will be a little tough of an opponent. But Cole Hamels is out injured. Then they head to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's not playing so well. Then they're going to spend some time against the red-hot Colorado Rockies, but then they're going to get a little bit of a reprieve with the Cincinnati Reds, who've kind of fallen off after a hot start. So they're going to start facing some teams that they might be able to play a little bit better. And you got to wonder, too, equally, what if it were the Braves that the Phillies faced 12 times instead of the Nationals? Their record might look a lot different right now if they had a couple extra wins. So really, in a way, you can kind of congratulate the Phillies for hanging in there as much as they did, this young team, and perhaps some players that aren't part of the long-term solution. But I think there's enough encouraging signs here that I think that there's a chance that the Phillies pitching staff and even their lineup will come and level out going forward.
Yeah, they don't play the Nationals again until September, so no more Nats. It seemed like they played them every other series, but no more Nats for a while. Frank Klose, at Frank Klose with a K on Twitter. Get them your mailbag questions each and every week. There was a lot of questions that came in that Frank didn't get a chance to get to, but maybe next week. You can hear it every week at this time on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Frank, enjoy the Texas Rangers, a little interleague play again for the Phils.
Yes, thanks, guys. You enjoy it too.